Hi there. I am back, and I brought Sam Youngman with me. Our conversation begins at about 28 minutes in today. Sam is great as always. I think you're going to love it. Before that, I've got your headlines and your clips. I took off yesterday, but I am back here today and very happy to have you. It is April 22nd. It is Earth Day, everybody. If that's something that you care about, it should be something that we all care about, but I feel increasingly like, unfortunately, it's not. It almost seems quaint at this point, but something near and dear to my heart, very, very important. Environmentalism, sustainability, and everything that goes along with it has been part of my personal religion for a real long time. If you've been listening for a long time, something I deeply care about, one of the issues most important to me, seems to have taken a back seat to democracy and freedom and liberty and all the words that conservatives used to use that now we seem to be using here on Earth One. So happy Earth Day and happy day to you, whatever is going on in your life. I'm happy to have you here with me to connect and to commiserate and to share and build this community. If you are not already a paid subscriber, I don't do ads here, but I do plug the subscription. It's patreon.com/Pete Dominick. Sign up now, upgrade now, and thank you very, very much to everybody who has and will. I really appreciate it. Can't do the show without you. All right. Well, I didn't do the show yesterday. Sorry about that. Tisk, tisk. Several people gave me a hard time about that, and other people were very supportive that I took a day off. Either way, I'm back here, excited to see you at our hangout on Thursday night. Let's get to those headlines that I've got for you. Of course, everybody at this point knows that the Pope passed away at the age of 88, and there's a lot, I guess, to say about that. That seems to be one of the top stories yesterday. I'm not really covering it that much here, if at all, other than to say, if it's something that you're interested in, it certainly matters. I highly recommend you read what it means, the obituaries, the future of the Catholic Church, the Pope's funeral arrangements, and the conclave that's supposed to start in, I think, about 20 days or so. He was the best Pope we've ever had. I'll say that. That's what I'll say. And now it's time to get to all of the other headlines that I've got for you, which are very, very important as well. Yesterday, one of those was that Pete Hegseth has apparently shared sensitive military information in a second Signal group chat. The president said he doesn't care about it. It's a waste of time, but NPR is reporting they're looking for a replacement. I talked with Sam Youngman about that. He's not so sure if that's going to be the case or not. Hegseth's office has already been shaken by the sudden firings of 3 of his top advisors, as well as one former official who left last week and then wrote in Politico that the Pentagon is in disarray. So that makes you feel good. You know, it's only the Department of Defense. In other news, Harvard is now suing the Trump administration, fighting back against the threats to slash billions of dollars from the university's research funding. The EPA is set to cancel tens of millions of dollars in grants to scientists studying environmental hazards. Hazards for who? Children in rural America. That's right. The EPA is set to cancel tens of millions of dollars in grants to scientists who are studying the environmental hazards faced by children in rural America. So I'm sure they won't mind. Speaking of science or anti-science, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Health and Human Service Secretary, he is now directing manufacturers to phase out 8 commonly used food dyes. I'm not quite sure what that will mean. If food just not going to look as good, but I think that's worth looking into. 4 Democratic lawmakers traveled yesterday to El Salvador to press for the release of Maryland resident who was wrongly deported there, Abrego Garcia, whose wife apparently gave birth yesterday. So that's pretty crazy. I haven't seen the reporting on what they learned or what access they got, but really important that those Democrats, including Maxwell Frost, who we'll hear from coming up, went there. The White House has been now hearing and potentially rolling out new ways to persuade women to have more children. This was a weird article to see. It felt like it was right out of The Handmaid's Tale. I mean, I think it's always good to encourage people to have children, but encouraging them to have children in the ways that they are that seem unrealistic and unhelpful. They're apparently throwing around the idea of giving $5,000 cash baby bonus. That's what they're calling it, to every American mother after delivery. But that's not even going to cover the delivery. That won't even necessarily cover the actual delivery. $5,000. Okay, thanks. What the hell's that going to do? Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Secretary, apparently had her bag containing her passport, her badge, and $3,000 stolen while she was dining at a Washington, D.C. restaurant. Apparently, she was using the cash withdrawal to treat her family to dinner. They're in town for Easter, I guess, dinner activities and Easter gifts. So I don't know. I don't know why she didn't want to use points. Seems weird. One of my favorite authors, maybe one of yours, Ryan Holiday, writes all these books about stoicism, like Ego is the Enemy, Daily Stoic, Silence is the Key. He is a sought-after speaker as well, and he was invited to speak at the U.S. Naval Academy. He was asked not to mention the fact that the Naval Academy's library has been stripped of hundreds of books that the fascist Team Trump might not like. Well, Ryan Holiday declined not to mention that, and his lecture was then canceled. I think that's a pretty big story for a lot of reasons, worth reading into. Ryan Holiday, like I said, a very sought-after speaker, very effective, and he was canceled. He wrote in an op-ed at the New York Times, "For the past 4 years, I've been delivering a series of lectures on the virtues of Stoicism to midshipmen at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. I was supposed to continue this on April 14th to the entire sophomore class on the theme of wisdom. Roughly an hour before my talk was to begin, I received a call. Would I refrain from any mention in my remarks of the recent removal of 381 supposedly controversial books from the Nimitz Library on campus? My slides had been sent up the chain of command at school, which was now, as it was explained to me, extremely worried about reprisals if my talk appeared to flout the executive order called Ending Radical and Wasteful Government DEI Programs and Preferencing. When I declined my lecture, as well as my planned speech before the Naval football team, which my books on Stoicism are popular, was canceled. The Academy made a schedule change that aligns with its mission of preparing midshipmen for careers of service, a Navy spokesman told the New York Times opinion section where Ryan Holiday wrote this piece. So I thought that was a really crazy and important telling story. What speakers are going to be allowed to speak? Who is going to be not canceled? It's going to be pretty interesting to see the types of speakers. They're going to be very, very well religious, I'm guessing, white, I'm guessing, and male is my question. If not those three categories, they're certainly going to be upholding things that favor those three categories of Americans. In Idaho, remember this video where these six men who prosecutors now said took part in forcibly removing a woman from a town hall meeting hosted by local Republicans, small city in northern Idaho. In February, they're facing charges now, including battery and false imprisonment, the guys who tore that woman out of the town hall meeting. So that, I think, is good news. And finally this, while there's an ocean between Europe and Canada, EU membership isn't on the ballot in Canada's crucial election later this month, but polling is showing that Canadians are intrigued by the idea of joining the EU bloc as U.S. President Donald Trump upends the relationship with his northern neighbor via a blizzard of punitive and belligerent tariffs and social media posts. Canadians are wondering if they should cozy up to new, more reliable allies. That would be devastating for all of us, but something that Canadians need to seriously consider, which is so sad. Those are your headlines. Many of them are so sad as well. But remember, that's the aberration. Those are the bad news. That's why they get printed. They're infinite acts of kindness and love, even in this moment, being performed right this second. I always like to remind you of that. All right, let's get to the audio that I've gathered for you today. Starting with Will Cain, who now hosts a show every day on Fox News. Our old friend Will Cain, well, he had Congressman Maxwell Frost on his show while Frost, I think, was in El Salvador. And Will Cain seemed to not know that Donald Trump is excited about deporting actual American citizens, or as he calls them, homegrown. Maxwell Frost, I think, could have handled this even differently, if better. I mean, handled it fine, but he said that Trump only mentioned it once. I'm almost positive there are 2 recordings of him, if not 3, saying it at this point. It's just real hard to believe that Will Cain hasn't heard it, but he can pretend for a little longer. Here it is.
It's about the fact that in the Oval Office, Donald Trump brought up that he wants to do the same thing to quote-unquote homegrowns. Homegrowns being U.S. citizens, a complete violation of our Constitution. I don't want to wait till it gets to that point. The reason I'm here as a congressman representing Orlando, Florida, is because I've received hundreds and hundreds of calls and emails and mail from my constituents. I represent a lot of immigrants. I represent a lot of people who see themselves represented in this situation. They're saying, Congressman, do what you can now, because it's him today and it can be one of us tomorrow.
I want to dig in on that point. You've made that point several times. But before we move forward, I have to stop down with what you just said. Donald Trump's made a statement about wanting to deport American citizens. Do you have that in front of you? I've not seen that statement. Can you please quote where that comes from, that he would like to deport American citizens?
He said it in the Oval Office. He said he wants to go for homegrowns next, people born and raised in the United States. Citizens.
Do you have anything?
And then
do you have anything besides your word on that? I have not seen that. So beyond your word, do you have the source of that? I would love to see that clip or that transcript of him saying he wants to deport American citizens.
There is a clip online. I encourage people to just Google Donald Trump homegrown, deporting homegrown criminals. It is something he said in the Oval Office.
Well, you understand how television works. We have these fancy earpieces. I like to hear very few instructions from my staff while you and I have a conversation. But we are in search of that clip as we speak. So as you and I have this conversation for the next several minutes, we'll be looking for that clip. But let's keep digging in on this idea.
Well, unfortunately, I just saw that clip. I don't know about the rest of that conversation if they ever got it. I'll have to go back and look. But there you go. That's Will Cain. Thank God he has the control room. I think Maxwell Frost should have suggested that, but I wonder what happened next. Who cares? Moving on, let's get to Tom Homan. He is the head of ICE, right? Is that right? He was on ABC News with Jonathan Karl on Sunday, and I just wanted to share this one with you. It's upsetting and triggering, but it's also kind of satisfying to hear Homan get caught not understanding how the law works when convenient.
But no one's removed just because of a tattoo.
In other words, the Alien Entity Act means you can grab somebody and you can deport them without an extended hearing because you have labeled them a terrorist. Because you've said you've determined that somebody is a member of the gang, and therefore they don't have to go through the extended process of the opportunity to have a full hearing. That's what you're saying. I mean, let's just be clear.
I'm saying we're following the laws of this country, and there's a different procedure for each one. We're doing things within the frame of the law. We're doing things legally.
Okay.
I stand by that. Now, again, I'm not a constitutional scholar. I'm not going to argue this in court. That's what the Department of Justice does. But I'm sitting here today thinking we've done the right thing for this nation, following the laws and the Constitution of this country.
All right, Tom Homan, the Trump administration's borders are. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Oh, that guy is like the definition of a thug. Really is. And that was awful, but wanted to share that with you. Also, I thought this was great. This is this clip from the Joe Rogan program. I don't think hear Joe at all, but you do hear this conservative historian that dressed down the guy co-hosting or sitting in on that show, Dave Smith. I've known Dave not well, but a lot of my career. He's more of a commentator than a comedian, but he's been talking about the Middle East for a really long time, but he doesn't really seemingly know as much as the guy sitting across from him who spent a lot of time there. And I thought I'd share this clip because it perfectly distills the situation where so many people are just spouting off on huge platforms about things that they probably shouldn't be. And I've always been critical of that, especially when it's people like this. But here it is. I thought this is really great. This is British conservative columnist Douglas Murray. And I'm not even sure who's right about the issue. It's something about checkpoints in the Middle East, in Israel or in Gaza. But the point is made, and I think made well. So here it is.
There was no deficit of goods coming in. I've been plenty of times.
There was no deficit?
No, there are
no
plenty
goods were kept out.
There are plenty. How many? Have you been to the crossing points?
No.
When were you last there at all?
I've never been.
You've never been?
Well, am I not allowed to talk about it now? Have you ever been to Nazi Germany? Are you allowed to have feelings about them?
You can't time travel, but you can. But you can travel.
Okay, but so what? So what's the point?
I find that
lots of people have been there and agree with me, and lots of people have been there and agree with you.
Yeah, but
so
if
I don't
you're
know
going to spend a year and a half talking about a place, you should at least do the courtesy of visiting it.
All right. I just think this is a non-argument.
You don't think?
Okay. No, I think it's a non-argument.
But if you're an expert,
well, you have to go and touch the ground.
No, I think you have to see. I think it's a good idea to see stuff, particularly if you spend a career talking about something. Yes, I have a journalistic rule of trying never to talk about a country even in passing unless I've at least been there.
Okay,
it's a sort of normal. It's a normal thing to do. You're talking about. Hang on, you're talking about crossing points. And not only have you never been to a crossing point in either Egypt or in Israel, but you've never even been to the region.
Okay. Again, I think this is a non-argument. I don't understand.
No, it's not a non-argument.
Yeah, it is.
It's not a non-argument if you're insisting that you're an expert of some kind, or not claiming you're an expert, but still talking about it, about the provisions going into Gaza or not, if you've never seen any of this going on.
So you're not
That's
allowed to
amazing
speak
to
about
me.
things that you've read about. You can only speak about things that you've seen with your own eyes.
You can talk about what you want, as you're proving. But that is a different matter from spending an awfully long amount of time talking about an issue in a region you haven't even had the courtesy to visit whilst developing all of these views about it. I mean, now I slightly get an idea of where you're coming from. You've read about this blockade, and so you imagine that that's what it is. I imagine you've read all the people who say that Gaza was a concentration camp, and you probably think that too. Am I right?
I mean, again, literally a concentration camp. It shares a lot of similarities, I would think.
Wow. Well, as I say, you can't time travel back to the Nazi era.
Let's
but
go
you
back to
could
the
go
blockade.
to the Middle East and actually visit it.
Okay,
It's
the
not
world...
All right. Well, what did you think of that? I loved it. I thought it was great. I thought it was a real well done. Dave Smith was terrified. He really didn't know what to do there. He is a libertarian hero, apparently, that guy. But me no gusta. But I thought that was good. All right. Well, I thought this was really good as well. This is from MSNBC's All In with Chris Hayes. He had this guest on who is a scientist, a doctor named Kevin Hall, who up until recently was working at the National Institute of Health, studying nutrition. And he was there for the past 2 decades. His work was focused on ultra-processed foods, and his work has been hobbled or ended under the Trump administration. Scientists have been raising such concerns for months, but for the past 2 decades, this guy was a nutrition, metabolism scientist at the National Institute of Health. He's devoted his entire career to studying how people's diets affect their health. And it's a sad day when one of the most prominent nutrition researchers at NIH is forced to leave his job in this way, and it's just infuriating that he had to remove himself from an actual study so that the study could get published. Anyway, I wanted to include as much of this interview as I could, so here it is.
Because yesterday, Kevin Hall announced that he's leaving. He's stepping away from his work at NIH, taking the early retirement offer, he writes. Unfortunately, recent events have made me question whether NIH continues to be a place where I can freely conduct unbiased research. Specifically, I experienced censorship in the reporting of our research because of agency concerns that it did not appear to fully support preconceived narratives of my agency's leadership about ultra-processed food addiction. Kevin Hall, 21-year veteran researcher in nutrition and metabolism sciences at the National Institutes of Health, joins me now. Dr. Hall, it's great to have you. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thanks for the invitation.
Let me just start by asking about what your life has been like at NIH. My sense is that you've liked the work a lot and you found it very rewarding to do the research you do. Is that how you would characterize it?
Yeah, it's been my dream job. I've been there for a long time. I've focused on various different aspects of nutrition and metabolism. And in recent years, I've focused on ultra-processed foods and what is it about diets that are high in ultra-processed foods that are driving diet-related chronic diseases and trying to uncover those mechanisms. You know, to be fair, it's actually been a struggle over past administrations to do this kind of research in a rigorous fashion. We're one of the only places left in the country that can admit people to a hospital, keep them for many weeks and months at a time, and control every aspect of their food environment. But it's a very slow and painstaking process. We can only admit a couple of people at a time, and to do a study that takes many, many years. And so when I heard that, you know, even before the election, there was this bipartisan support to find, you know, what are the causes of diet-related chronic diseases? Why are we having these epidemics of obesity and diabetes in America? And trying to understand the real physiological mechanisms, I was excited. I thought, you know, finally, we'll actually have the resources to do these studies much more quickly and deliver answers to the American people in a fashion that they deserve. And unfortunately, I experienced some hiccups along the way in the transition.
When did you first sort of have something that was a red flag or felt like something was amiss?
Yeah, so in 21 years at the NIH, I've never been denied the opportunity to present our science at a scientific conference. And I had the opportunity to do so at the beginning of this month. I had an invitation that I tried to clear through the normal process at the NIH. And it was highlighted that this was a topic of interest to the agency, and so it went up to a higher level at Health and Human Services, above the NIH level, and it was denied. And at first I thought, okay, well, this is maybe just because there's a travel pause, and the organizers of the conference invited me to do it online, just a virtual presentation, and then that was denied, and no reason was given. And that was the first hint that something might be amiss.
That had not happened to you before. You said in 21 years, it's like that's part of what you're a scientist. You present research. This gets denied.
That's
and then
part
there's
of my job.
Then something else happens with a portion of a paper, as I understand it, that they wanted you to remove.
Yeah, so I had been working for about a year or more, actually, with various university scientists around the country to prepare a really comprehensive review on what we know about ultra-processed foods in various aspects. And part of the paper was written by a colleague at a university on health equity and how these foods are, being targeted to underprivileged communities and why this is a potential problem. And I put the paper through the usual NIH process of getting approval to have this paper submitted for publication. And it actually went through the process until the very next day, where it was flagged that because of this description of health equity in the paper, that would have to be edited to comply with executive orders, or else I would have to remove myself as an author. Now, I didn't write that section. I wasn't going to censor my colleague, and so I voluntarily removed myself as an author. Again, it's the very first time that's happened to me in 21 years.
So this is a portion of this paper that was written about health equity where there's obvious disparities here. We know this in terms of processed food and who's consuming. I mean, this is not like some invented notion. You take your name off so it can be published. And then you had a study. This really struck me. So you had a study about basically the mechanisms of what we might call addiction and processed foods. And you came to an interesting finding on that study. Tell me about what happened with that study.
Yeah, so this was a paper that was already out the door. It was going to be published when the new administration came in. And we'd actually prepared a press release within the NIH to discuss this paper. And what we were interested in doing was understanding when people consume ultra-processed foods, do they really hijack the brain's reward system in a way that we know addictive drugs do, like drugs like methamphetamine or cocaine? They cause this really large increase in dopamine in the brain. And so we decided to test, does the same thing happen with ultra-processed milkshakes that are really high in fat and sugar? And so we designed this study that took many, many years. It was the largest study of its kind, the most well-controlled. We actually had people admitted to the hospital for several days to control their diet in a way that had never been done before. And we published this result, which was interesting. It seemed that these foods, while they may be addictive in many people, didn't cause the outsized increase in dopamine that many drugs that are highly addictive do. And it really challenged some of the narratives behind how these foods actually work to change your brain chemistry. And so that was the main conclusion of our paper was, yeah, these foods might be addictive in many people, and we really need to understand that better, but it's probably not working in the way that many of us thought it was working in the past. So that paper was due to be published, and it was published. And we had a reporter ask for an interview to discuss the findings of that paper for a piece that she was writing in the New York Times. And that interview was denied. Our press release was also quashed for no reason given. And finally, the reporter at the New York Times asked, what is it? Why can't I have an interview? I've actually interviewed Dr. Hall before. We'd really love his input on this paper. And then she actually received a telephone call from the HHS communications director asking whether or not this was really a piece about RFK Jr., because the paper didn't seem to fully support the preconceived narrative that ultra-processed foods are addictive. And so I was shocked to hear about this. And after that conversation, the reporter was given the ability to ask written questions, to which I responded to those written questions through our press office and gave approval to some slight edits about, whether drugs were drugs of abuse or addiction. And then what I saw was fascinating because the responses that were then sent to the reporter had been edited trying to downplay the study, saying it was very small when it was actually the largest of its kind, and that the participants had only been in the hospital for 5 days, when this was actually the only study that had that level of control. And it struck me as really concerning, because if people were willing to say, there's a little bit of daylight between our preconceived notions about even how the basic science of food addiction might work and the narrative that was going on, what is it going to be like if they want to start, actually meddling in the research itself? Yeah. That was my concern. And I actually then tried to raise that with the NIH director and RFK Jr. directly.
All right, there you go. I know that was a long clip. Are you still with me? I just couldn't press stop on it when I heard it, so I figured that's the threshold for me. And sharing it here on the podcast, Kevin Hall, really important, and I thought that gave you background and understanding with all of the context and nuance of that conversation with what's happening, specifically there at NIH and probably a lot of other places. Very disconcerting. And that's why now I want to share with you some comedy. That's right. Let's get to some jokes before we get to my conversation with Sam Youngman, which also has plenty of laughs in it.
Hope you had a good Easter. We had a good Easter, but you have to say Easter's probably the weirdest holiday of all. None of it makes sense. And I'm not even talking about like the resurrection, the crucifixion, these things. Even the kids stuff is just strange. So let me get this straight. Jesus rises again, and to celebrate, you boil a couple dozen eggs, sit down with the kids and color the eggs, put the eggs in the refrigerator so they don't kill you, and then at some point in the night, a bunny shows up, opens your refrigerator, removes the eggs, pulls them all out, scatters them all over your house, under couches and all sorts of places, and leaves. And then you wake up and you have to go around and find them, put them back in the thing and back in... This is insane behavior. If you had a nephew who did that, you'd check him into rehab immediately. Between Easter and 420, a lot of stuff got rolled yesterday. And I was thinking about this too. Was that for Jesus or we? Imagine if the first Easter was on 420. How much more freaked out would everyone have been when Jesus came back? Like, whoa, dude, what are you doing here? Our peep-headed president got in the Easter spirit yesterday. He posted an unusually warm Easter message. He wrote, Melania and I would like to wish everyone a very happy Easter. Whether you're heading out to church or watching service from home, may this day be full of peace and joy for all who celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. He is written. Which is nice, but then 6 minutes later, happy Easter to all, including the radical left lunatics who are fighting and scheming so hard to bring murderers, drug lords, dangerous prisoners, the mentally insane, and well-known MS-13 gang members and wife beaters back into our country, and so on. It's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde your tax returns. We have a president who addresses the nation like the Zodiac Killer on Easter Sunday.
Well done, Jimmy Kimmel. All right. Well, there you go. Love it. Some laughs, and now some more laughs, and a very serious conversation as well at times, most of the time. It's Sam Youngman. He writes Today's Big Stuff, which is my favorite newsletter. He's a professor out in Southern California, and he's a former veteran reporter, covered a whole bunch of campaigns, worked in the White House press corps, and we love him. Follow him on Blue Sky. Subscribe to Today's Big Stuff. He's one of my favorites and quickly becoming one of yours. Let's do it right now with my latest conversation with Sam Youngman. And yeah, we did this live on YouTube, youtube.com/standupwithpete, trying to do most of my interviews now, whenever I do them, live on YouTube. So go subscribe and you can watch there first. And now, anytime. And there he is. Oh, look at it. The great Sam Youngman live on YouTube and anytime on the podcast. Just the man I wanted to talk to the day after Easter. The co-writer of the greatest daily newsletter, I would argue, that's ever been created. Thank you for joining me, Sam.
Thanks, buddy. Yesterday was Easter?
Yeah, but I don't...
I can't believe Trump scheduled Hitler's birthday and 420 for Easter. It's like that man doesn't care about religion at all.
Oh, I didn't know that he scheduled Hitler's birthday. I watched over the weekend, I watched Hitler's Last Day, because why not? It was on. It was one of the weird... Do you ever flip through the channels? I don't flip. There I was flipping through channels. And I go, I'll watch that. And all I want to say about it is it really did remind me of the way that Trump's sycophants, including in his cabinet, looked at Hitler. They look like him, And I think it's important that we know that history. That's how the Germans, the highest ranking Germans like Goebbels, looked at Hitler exactly the same way, Sam. History helps.
Yeah, it's gross. No, I was just kidding. I remember last year, Easter and Trans Visibility Day happened to fall on the same day. And all the righties were wondering, why would Joe Biden do this? And yeah, he
oh,
really
shit, that's I knew your joke had a double meaning. Oh, wow. Yeah, of course. J.D. Vance killed the Pope. I woke up this morning and saw that, and it was both horrifying and hilarious, and I don't know how to feel about it, because is it true that one of the last people to see the Pope alive was the vice president, scoundrel J.D. Vance? Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I tell you, I was ready to put this on JD too. I figured the Pope walked in, saw JD, pants around his ankles, getting to know a couch, and just croaked right on the spot. But I tell you, I've done a little research through prayer and talking to some Catholic expert friends of mine, and it turns out the Pope died because Sam Alito touches himself.
Wow.
I know, shocking, right? Yeah.
I'll tell you what, when I was growing up Catholic, I was sure the Pope was going to die because I was touching myself. That's a real self-important way to feel.
You're good as long as you don't touch Sam Alito.
I also convinced myself that if I didn't touch myself and could still get off on other things, then I'm not even joking. I thought then that was okay. That wasn't a sin. Thoughts and prayers to my soccer ball pillow.
I was going to say the produce in your house must have just been unsafe for eating.
Don't eat that, Mom. Sam, what else do we want to say about the Pope, his passing, and JD's visit? It would be a pretty big deal. I think that the president sent him some nice condolences, didn't he? Trump?
Yeah, it's shocking, right? Yeah. No, look, my understanding, look, I'm not Catholic. I am not a super religious guy, but my understanding is this Pope was actually, he liked to party. He was actually a pretty cool guy by papal standards. On the contrary, J.D. Vance is in no way, shape, or form a pretty cool guy, just a terrible human being. And I feel like this is really a strike against the concept of religion. You look at this Pope, he lived a life of piety for, 88 years? And he still had to spend the last day of his life with J.D. fucking Vance. Like, how bad? I feel like this is a punishment and not the reward for a life of piety. I don't know. I continue to have trouble with organized religion just because of this.
I do too. I have people saying all these nice things about the Pope, and I'm like, fine, he was the best Pope, but what's the standard? And the institution itself is the worst of the worst. I grew up in it. I think it's horrifying. And until this Pope or any other Pope is going to fight for women to be equals, I'm really just not that interested.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think Tommy Chong would make a great next Pope, and that's who I'm pulling for.
Yeah, who would be the next Pope if we could pick the people is a fun exercise to discuss. J.D. Vance, though, continuing to struggle. He can't get anything right. He couldn't even hold the college football national champion Ohio State's trophy without it breaking. It seems every time he comes out in public or pops his head out on social media, he just loses. He's a big loser.
Yeah. Huge loser. I have to say, I was going to say we were too hard on Dan Quayle, but not really because he's an asshole who attacks single moms. But it is kind of wild how the only even moderately competent Republican vice president in the last few decades is the guy who shot somebody in the face while he was vice president. Like Dick Cheney was like the only competent vice president. I can't say enough bad things about JD, but I always think about the video of him sitting on stage when Trump was speaking on support of his Senate campaign. And he said, JD can't stop kissing my ass. And JD just sat there laughing and taking it. And I just feel after that, isn't a daily public humiliation just par for the course?
It's a really good point that anybody that pleads any kind of loyalty or allegiance to Donald Trump, much less now they're wearing Mao pins. I'm sure you covered that. Some of the cabinet secretaries, including the head of the FCC, has a little golden pin with Trump picture on it. And that's exactly what Mao did and other sycophantic authoritarian losers. And now, anybody who works for him, took the job, says yes, especially after Trump won, they're disgraced. And so we move on to the potentially worst Secretary of Defense of all time. It looks like Pete Hegseth, according to news today, is a dead man walking.
Yeah, I'm going to quibble with that. I don't think he is. I think Trump would happily see every single U.S. man and woman in the armed forces die a painful death before he would admit that he was wrong about his drunken jackass neo-Nazi Pete Hegseth. It's just that's where we are right now. Hegseth is a disaster, never should have been confirmed. But I think, and he's not wrong. If Trump gives on any one of these things and admits he's wrong, about tanking the economy or putting an anti-vax brainworm nut job in charge of HHS or putting a drunken weekend Fox News host in front of the Pentagon, then the whole house of cards comes crashing down. If he admits even a slightest little sliver of reality, if he lets even a slightest little sliver of reality in, he's toast. So we got to live in the fantasy land. We've only got another 3.5 years to go.
Do you really honestly think that Hegseth or other cabinet secretaries are not going to be fired or for whatever other reason dismissed by this president? Do you think because of what you just said? And I think it's possible that he refuses to ever admit he was wrong. Obviously, in Trump 1, he fired everybody.
Yeah. No, and this isn't just me. This is reporting from Gabriel Sherman, who really knows his stuff.
Yeah, he's
but
good.
The reality is Trump just doesn't want to give the press a scalp. When I saw the only people reporting, the only outlet that is reporting that Hegseth is on his way out is NPR. And if you think Trump's going to fire Hegseth now instead of just taking the opportunity to prove NPR wrong, I feel like you probably haven't been paying attention the last few years. That's what matters. The only thing I think that would get any of these idiots fired is if they criticize Trump, if they admit the truth about his tariffs, if they admit the truth about Hegseth, if they admit the truth about any of it, that gets them canned. But other than that, I think they're in for a penny, in for a pound.
Crazy to hear that apparently Hegseth had a signal chat with his brother and his wife and several others where he was sharing secret information as well. Apparently, Politico has a story of one of the guys that just got forced out for leaking. Apparently, they caught him. This guy's now written his own piece at Politico disparaging Hegseth and says that the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, is in disarray. That's scary to think.
Yeah, it is. Although I would say let's consider the source. This guy didn't call himself anonymous because that was already taken, so he's just calling himself asshole. Keep in mind, this is the dude who was involved in the whole Jackie Robinson thing. So
really? I didn't know that.
It's not a den of thieves. It's a den of absolute scum. And when one of them's pointing fingers at the other one, you have to assume they're both. Yeah, I'm always reminded. There's a Family Guy sketch where Maggie and Jake Gyllenhaal are arguing over who is the worst. And their dad comes and he says, "Kids, you're both terrible." And that's how I feel anytime one of these intramural fights starts in the Trump administration. There are no heroes here.
That's a great point, and thank you for pushing back slightly on my reverence toward a recently forced out Trump Secretary of Defense aide, because that's absolutely right. You note in today's big stuff, there are 561 days until the midterm elections. Sam, a lot of people are saying that the tide is turning, or some other similar phrase, on Trump. And that has to do, I think it's fair to say, with the economy, this ridiculous tariff trade war that he has started, and of course, just deporting people who have committed no crimes. What do you think about those who are saying, you know what, I think he's turning ripe. I think it's looking bad. The sun is coming down, or the walls are closing in.
I would say I've heard that song and dance before, and I've still got to look at that orange ass every damn day. Adam Serwer at The Atlantic keeps making a great point on Blue Sky that he'll believe people are actually turning on Trump when they stop voting for him. And I have to say, I feel the same way. Yeah, I'm not surprised people are turning on him over the economy because he's fucking up the economy pretty royally. I'm not surprised he's losing points on immigration because these are some pretty ugly headlines. But the truth of the matter is, when you dig through these polls, and even the polls that show Trump's approval rating cratering, the generic ballot between House Democrats, House Republicans for next year is still pretty even. It's nowhere near the landslide right now that you'd like to see. The good news is we've got time to run it up. But I think I think that there are a lot of us who are going to have to accept some very ugly realities about our country and the people we share it with that we don't necessarily want to believe. We want to believe that they were all fooled into supporting this. We want to believe that they just didn't have enough information, that they just didn't see, that they were really busy on January 6th. They just didn't see what happened that day. And I think the reality is we're going to have to embrace the truth and live with the truth that a lot of people like this guy and they like that he's an asshole.
I appreciate you saying that, and the way that you said it. I think it's always an important reminder that if we haven't already come to that truth, then we're going to have to. So no matter what happens, not to mention the actual damage that has already been done that can't be undone, like cutting funding for USAID, cutting veterans care, cutting, most importantly, maybe research funding and grants, the damage and threats to, I suppose you could undo the law firm, and the threats to certain universities, but a lot of it can't be undone. And we're seeing so much of that happening. And let me just stay, though, on the tide is turning for 1 second, because I want to ask you about Democrats and their reaction. You and others, including myself, celebrating and showing respect for Chris Van Hollen for what he did going to El Salvador today. I learned from your newsletter today's big stuff. Maxwell Frost leading another delegation of Democrats down there, although Republican James Comer don't like it. He don't like it. Only Republicans can go and have photo ops in front of tortured prisons. Those with the most face tattoos, please come to the front. That was somebody else's joke on this show, though. So the question is about those who are saying we shouldn't be focused on this immigration stuff. It doesn't look good for us. Let's not take debate. Let's focus on the meat and potatoes, the economics, the pocketbook stuff. I think Gavin Newsom and other Democrats are saying that. What do you think of that fight?
I think Gavin Newsom was really bold in going out of his way to lose the Democratic primary a few years before it even starts. I've been applauding Chris Van Hollen a lot these last few days. But on Meet the Press yesterday, when he said Americans are sick of these stick your finger in the wind politicians, I think he nailed it. To me, the thing about Trump is Trump's a very dishonest man, but because he isn't poll tested, because he doesn't use Politico speak, he sounds like he's honest. He just sounds different than what we're used to hearing. To me, authenticity is the new coin of the realm when it comes to politicians. Somebody who can't tweet for themselves, somebody who can't speak for themselves, somebody who needs poll numbers and a press secretary to do it for them is going to struggle in this new environment. I don't know what Gavin Newsom believes in today. I don't know what Gavin Newsom will believe in tomorrow. I do think a secret to winning elections is to actually stand for something and not be a wimp about it, because people don't respect that. You know how I know that? Because I voted for Gavin Newsom and I don't respect him anymore.
Oh, wow. We got an exclusive. I think
I'm sure he's terribly upset.
He just actually texted me. He heard, because we're live. He saw that, and he is filling up a cup of tears for you to drink from.
Yeah, at the French Laundry, no doubt.
You mentioned Chris Van Hollen. That's where he went during COVID when everybody is supposed to be sheltering in place. Chris Van Hollen.
Thank you for getting my very obscure reference.
I get it. I get them all. I fucking absolutely love you and love that we're live right now. Chris Van Hollen's courage is contagious, you write in your amazing newsletter. And people who don't subscribe to today's big stuff will have something terrible happen to them tonight. So I would say subscribe today if you don't. I can't control these things.
We're worse than a chain letter.
You mentioned authenticity. You say he's authentic to a lot of people. I get it. What does authenticity look like if you are a Democrat? It looks like what Van Hollen did. It looks like AOC and Bernie are doing. What do you mean?
I think all of the above. I think it means standing for something and then being able to articulate why you're standing for something. Yeah. It doesn't mean let's wait. Let's just hold on for a second and see if this violation of the Constitution polls. No, you stand up for what's right. I tell you, I was never a huge Bernie guy, and I went to see him and AOC and Maxwell Frost in downtown LA a couple weekends ago when they were here for a protest. 36,000 people on a hot day here in LA. And I got to tell you, if you're feeling down, if you're feeling angry, scared, whatever, if you can get to a protest or get to an event where other people feel the same way you do, it will help a great deal. And that's really one of the main themes of our newsletter, is reminding people that they're not alone, that you're not crazy. Those sons of bitches are. So it's been very comforting to see a lot of Democrats find their voice and find their spines at a time when too many were not. I think you and I talked about this a little bit last time I was on the show, in that we went through this after 2016, right? When the Women's March was happening, we had Democratic leaders that were taking the wimp route. We want to find ways to work with President Trump, all that stuff. And it created a vacuum, a leadership vacuum, where nobody else was willing to take this lying down. And we created Michael Avenatti, a complete scumbag con artist who came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden we're talking about him running for president. That's how desperate we were for somebody to fight back. I'm reminded of the lines from The American President with Michael J. Fox. I know it's verboten to quote Aaron Sorkin these days, and I hope you'll forgive me, but
go ahead.
Michael J. Fox talks about people are so desperate that for leadership, they'll crawl through the desert. If they can't find water, they'll drink the sand. And Avenatti was clearly the sand. I think we've been in danger of being in that same kind of wilderness, which is why I'm grateful to AOC. I'm grateful to Bernie. I'm grateful to Cory Booker. I'm grateful to Chris Van Hollen. I'm grateful to people who had the guts to say, screw the polls. I'm just going to stand up for what's right.
That's why I've come out fully in support of Stephen A. Smith. for president. I think he is 2028 sand in the desert.
Yeah.
Boy, I hate. I tweeted, by the way, I go, this is one of my most proud, not that funny. I'm not Sam Youngman funny on the social, that's for sure. But I wrote, Stephen A. Smith is for white people, right? And all the black people are like, yes. All of them. I asked all of them. They're like, yes, he's not for us.
Sean Hannity's buddy say that? Yeah.
I mean, come on. You see right through that hollow barrel.
I know. The thing is, I am a Sports Center viewer, and when First Take comes on, I change the channel. Like, I don't know who that's for. And how in the world is that guy getting $60 million to do that shit? I will say, though, he's a funny guy. When I heard him say that he would have fought LeBron, I thought, you know what? That's the funniest damn thing I've heard in a long time.
Oh, what the greatest thing was LeBron James dressed him down in public at the end of a basketball game. You couldn't hear it, but you could watch it. And people who didn't see it, go watch it, because Stephen A. Smith comes on after and then interprets it on TV as, listen, that was a man who is proud of that was a proud father. That's all I want to say. And it's, yeah, why don't you just tell us what he said? He said, keep my son's name out of your mouth, you fucking idiot, or I'll break you in half if you ever say anything about my son again, is my guess. That's my guess. I don't know. I couldn't hear the audio. Okay. I got to ask you, of course, about Jerome Powell and the Fed. This is the least sexy of all the sexy issues that we talk about and write about. Economics, trade war. I don't think I've talked to you since the trade war began, and people are acting like because he, quote, caved, that things changed. We just haven't seen the prices. If you haven't seen them yet, you're going to see them in the next couple of weeks. Everything is probably about to change. Who knows what's going to happen with your investment portfolio? Market's down again today. Who knows what's going to happen with your job? If you lose your job, if you lose your retirement investment portfolio, and if the third strike is shit's more expensive, that's it. That's a wrap, I say. What do you think of my prediction? I hope it doesn't happen.
Didn't we just have a whole damn election about the cost of things? I thought the deal was we gave away our democracy and our self-respect, and in exchange we got cheaper eggs. And that has not been the case. Look, I was not always a Powell fan. During the early part of the Biden administration, it seemed to me that Powell was really hoping to drive up unemployment as a way to combat inflation. To me, the brilliance of the Biden administration was that they were able to engineer that soft landing, get inflation relatively under control while still lowering the unemployment rate. They didn't have to put people out of work and able to get the inflation rate down. I've come around, and part of it has to do with finding out Powell's a deadhead. Part of it is him quoting Ferris Bueller. And part of it is he's one of the few people standing between us and absolute economic calamity. If Trump gets in charge of the Federal Reserve, which, by the way, the Supreme Court is setting it up to where maybe he can, I think at that point we're back to trading using beads and stones and stuff like that.
I don't know what you're talking about with the Supreme Court making some change with the executive and its effect on the Federal Reserve. I don't know. That's something I'm not familiar with.
So basically right now there's a case that the Supreme Court is considering that is deciding whether or not all executive branch independent agencies should actually be run by the president himself. And that would include ostensibly the Federal Reserve. So yeah, there's lots of reason to be afraid.
Oh God. All right. Let me just ask you for your thoughts on, I love talking to you about everything. You're very smart. You're very funny. But to me, the most important quality that you have and that most of my guests have is a moral clarity. Not only do you have a moral clarity from living a couple lives, it would seem, from what I know of you, but it informs and influences everything that you do. Your choices when you left your old career, your choices with the work that you're doing now, your sobriety, everything, the way you treat people. And I build this up because I do want to hear how you feel and how you think about what's happened to Abrego Garcia and some of these other people. And by the way, they might very well be criminals. And I think it's smart that Van Hollen is trying to say, I'm not defending that man. I'm defending the Constitution and due process, that everybody, including non-citizens, has the right to a trial. That's a morally clear thing in our country and has been for a very long time. I remember watching that John Adams miniseries where Paul Giamatti did a great performance defending British soldiers who murdered people in the streets in front of everybody's eyes. They still got a trial. What do you think about what has happened with Abrego Garcia, the El Salvador, and how it's being received too? But morally, how do you feel about it?
Let me quibble with something. I don't know that I am all that much of a morally upstanding person. I've always been a degenerate, to be honest with you, and I liked that. What I have found is It's like people talking about, I didn't leave the Democratic Party left me. That's how I feel about degeneracy. Like, I didn't leave, degeneracy left me. It's very easy to tell the difference between right and wrong these days, thanks to Trump and his
No, I'm
minions.
not buying it, dude. I'm actually interrupting you to not buy it because
I'm uncomfortable with
Fine, because you know you've done bad things, because
Sure.
you know you can be a degenerate, is what makes you a good person. We're all flawed. That the idea that you can recognize it. These people, Pete Hegseth doesn't say I'm a degenerate. That's the difference between you and him. You guys are almost the exact same guy, but you admit.
Yeah. Even the same tats and everything. It's creepy. You can't tell us apart. No, I guess I just mean, first of all, thank you. I appreciate that. But I guess I just mean the bar is so damn low these days that it doesn't take much to be morally superior to the other side, right? It doesn't take much to be heroic or patriotic these days. All you have to do is the bare minimum. Hey, due process is a good thing. Hey, we probably shouldn't be kidnapping people and sending them to life at a concentration camp in El Salvador. Again, these are not big moral swings. This is just basic shit.
I disagree again. Because while it doesn't take much to recognize right from wrong, I agree with that. It does take a lot to stand up. And you know that's true because you know that in my town, what happened to me. So locally, if you take a stand about what you believe is right, you could be marginalized. Your family could be marginalized. If you do it on social media, you could lose your job. And if you do it publicly, they could come for you. People increasingly are worried. So I do think that I'm splitting the difference, which is it should be easy to know what is right and what is wrong, but it sure as hell does seem harder to stand up, publicly demand change. People are afraid of standing up right now, both in the private sector and just publicly because of what this administration now is doing to people.
Yeah, and you're not wrong. We heard Lisa Murkowski, senator from Alaska, say just last week that she's afraid, that other people are afraid of what happens if they take a stand. I guess what I would say is America's worth it. We're not the first people in the history of this country who had to put everything on the line to try and make this a better place. I would say, and I don't mean to be cutesy about this, but I would say it's a lot easier to fire off a tweet or an op-ed than it is to stand face to face with a British musket. Every generation has to give something for this country to be what it can be. And this is our battle now. And yeah, we're up against absolute monsters, some truly dangerous, sick people. I'm starting to sound like Trump. But the thing is, we know what the stakes are now. And at that point, yeah, maybe it does take a lot of guts to stand up, but it takes, I don't know. To me, the alternative is much, much worse.
I hear you and I appreciate you. That's the kind of person you are. And I like to think I am as well. But I am laughing because you're like, it takes a lot to stand up to a British musket. I'm like, no, it doesn't. You know how long it takes that to fucking reload? Like we have AR-15s. Like I would give anything for a mass shooter to run in with a musket. I would grab it by the barrel and punch him in the face with his own gun. It's a musket, Sam. They have guns now that fire 15 bullets a second. I would take that musket guy out, no problem, with all the courage and bravery of any American male.
If only they'd had a musket. You know what? I'm just going to stop there.
Yeah, exactly. Musket. Okay, so just one more question on the economy and tariffs and trade. What are you seeing? Who are you following? Who are you reading? What do you think's going to happen with our economy? Is there any way out of this death spin of potentially the dollar and treasury bonds, much less the value of your portfolio, the price of things, of cars, of everything that you need? Do you think there's any way out of this? How bad is it going to get? What are we doing?
I don't know. I think I'm in the same paralyzed with fear stance as everybody else. I've got a retirement account that I'm watching disappear. I'm wondering, what does the next 6 months like? I was looking at a new car. I'm now putting that on hold. Yeah, I don't know, man. I tell you the truth, what I'm watching these days, watch a little CNBC. It's where reality is getting in. And holy cow, it's actually really good television to watch some of these guys, like watch reality just come crashing through the wall like the Kool-Aid Man, and they can't deny it anymore. It's there. It's in their living room. And of course, there are guys like Carl who are there who have, I think, been pretty honest and upfront about what we're looking at for a while now. I don't know, man. I'm scared, just like everybody else. And I feel like the more he destroys, the more hopefully people see what he really is. And I don't know, maybe we can rebuild.
What do you make of all the rallies around the country to protest the resistance?
I love it. To me, it's America at its best. And again, it goes back to that, just the comfort of knowing I'm not alone. that everybody else is scared shitless. Everybody else is freaked out. Everybody else is mad as hell. It's good knowing that I'm not just stewing in those emotions alone, that there are millions of us who feel the same way. And there's strength in numbers. That's like they said, they got the guns, but we got the numbers. And I'll take that deal.
If you haven't subscribed to Today's Big Stuff, I just put a link in the chat. I don't know if that works. I don't know what I'm doing. But you can just go to Today's Big Stuff. Just look it up and subscribe right now. I can't wait till it comes out every day. It gives me several different emotions that other newsletters don't, including information I don't see elsewhere and laughs I definitely don't get anywhere. You guys are brilliant. I'm always so happy when you join me. Thanks for doing this live. We'll do it live. Fuck it. I'll write it and we'll do it live. Thank you, my friend.
Pete, I really appreciate it, man. You're always such a great supporter. I'm grateful. And that was a pretty good Bill O'Reilly impression.
Thank you. Yeah, we're good buddies. Yeah, there he goes. Sam Youngman, everybody. Watch it on YouTube anytime if you want. YouTube.com/standup with Pete. Go over there and subscribe for free and sign up for a paid subscription here to keep it going. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. That's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much to Sam Youngman. Thank you to you. Thank you to the world around us that allows all of this to happen. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Be the change you want to see in the world. Have a good day. Check out Discord if you're a stand-up subscriber, where you're never alone on the Discord platform. And that's it. I'll talk to you tomorrow right here on Stand Up. Thank you. Bye-bye, bumblebees. Take it away, John Carroll.
When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels in leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep things right. We got to open up the window to let in some light.